Welcome to History's Mysteries, a place where the echoes of the past linger in the quiet of night. Here, forgotten worlds awaken softly, and the stories of time unfold like dreams. So settle in, breathe deeply, and let history whisper you to sleep. The world at the bottom of the globe has always been a mystery. Even now, as satellites sweep its white expanse and research stations hum through the endless cold, something about Antarctica feels older than time. Long before its name was carved into maps, it existed only as rumour, the unknown southern land. Mariners believed that for the world to balance, there must be another continent far to the south, mirroring the great lands of the north. They did not know that beneath the ice, the balance they sought had already been broken once, long ago. Terra Australis Incognita. It begins with a map. In 1513, the Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis sketched a chart of the world. He claimed to have compiled it from ancient sources, some Greek, some Phoenician, some perhaps older still. When modern historians examined it, they found something impossible. The lower edge of his map showed the coast of Antarctica, not as it appears today, frozen and buried beneath miles of ice, but as it would have been thousands of years earlier, ice-free and detailed in a way no sailor of the 1500s could have known. Mountains and inlets match the contour of Queen Maud Land, as revealed only centuries later by seismic surveys. How could a 16th century admiral have known the shape of a continent lost under 2 miles of ice? Some scholars waved the mystery aside as coincidence, yet others whispered that the Piri Reis map was a memory of a forgotten world. In the early 1800s, explorers such as James Cook and Fabian von Bellingshausen circled the southern seas. Their journals spoke of endless pack ice, of days when the horizon itself froze into glass. Yet among their notes lay an unease. Cook wrote of earth-coloured snow, as though volcanic dust or ancient soil had bled upward through the weakness. In a few places his men found rounded stones, smoothed by water, on beaches where no river ran. It was as if Antarctica remembered rivers it no longer had. By 1911, when Amundsen reached the South Pole and planted the flag of Norway, the world congratulated itself on having conquered the last great wilderness. But a few of the scientists who followed him south began to sense that the continent's silence was not emptiness, it was concealment. Fossils of ferns and tree trunks emerged from the exposed rock of the transantarctic mountains, proof that this frozen place had once been green. Later, in the 1970s, drilling cores would reveal pollen from broad-leafed forests dated to 40 million years ago. Yet between the lines of those reports was another question. Had the warmth lasted even longer than scientists dared to admit? Long enough, perhaps, for humans, or something like them, to have walked those shores before the Great Freezing began. In 1939, a German expedition landed on the Queen Maud coast. Officially it was for whaling and mapping, but among the documents later declassified after the war, there were photographs of geometric shadows under the ice. Triangular forms too regular to be natural. Some dismissed them as crevasse illusions. Others, especially those who had seen the Piri Reis map, believed they had found the outline of ancient structures buried in the glacial crust. Half a century later, when satellites began measuring gravitational anomalies, they detected strange densities beneath that same region, shapes of stone unlike mountain ranges, clustered in hexagonal patterns beneath miles of compacted ice. To the public, These results were written off as data noise, yet a few researchers quietly passed the coordinates from one generation to another. The secret that linked them was a name found in an Egyptian fragment. The Nasura Tables, a set of broken inscriptions describing a land south of all lands where the gods had once hidden their halls. The hieroglyphs spoke of frozen waters above mountains and pillars that sleep beneath the white sky. For centuries it was assumed to be myth, perhaps a poetic metaphor for death, but the tables also included a sequence of star positions corresponding to roughly 10,500 BCE, the same alignment recorded on the Giza Plateau. If both sites referred to the same epoch, the implication was staggering. Civilization, as we define it, did not begin in Sumer or Egypt, but somewhere else, long before the last ice age ended. Modern geology tells us that around 12,000 years ago, Earth's climate changed abruptly. Ice sheets collapsed, sea levels rose, and entire coastlines vanished. To most historians, this is the boundary between prehistory and history, the dawn of agriculture, the birth of settled life. But to a handful of fringe scholars and explorers, it marks something else. The erasure of a world advanced enough to leave maps, myths, and perhaps ruins, now locked beneath Antarctica's frozen cap.
In 1958, when the International Geophysical Year opened Antarctica to global scientific collaboration, several nations began deep core drilling to study ice strata. One Soviet team working near Lake Vostok detected odd temperature gradients and magnetic interference. Their logs mention artificial heat signatures more than 2 miles down, as though some metallic body, warmer than its surroundings, lay buried there. The report was quietly sealed, and the team relocated. When Western scientists requested the raw data, they were told it had been lost in transmission. Decades later, satellite radar confirmed the existence of Lake Vostok itself, a vast body of liquid water trapped beneath 4 kilometers of ice, isolated for millions of years. And yet, at its eastern edge, sensors detected straight lines and right angles along the lakebed, the geometry of architecture, not geology. In 1999, a joint Russian-American project attempted to lower instruments through a borehole toward the subglacial lake. The feed transmitted for only seconds before cutting out, but those seconds were enough to show what looked like carved basalt walls descending into darkness. The images were dismissed publicly as noise, pixel artifacts. Unofficially, they were copied and stored under restricted classification. What lies beneath Vostok is still unknown, but some of those who saw the first data spoke of an arrangement resembling a city grid extending for kilometers. The idea of an Antarctic civilization was once dismissed as fantasy, a companion to legends of Atlantis. Yet if one steps back and reads the evidence not as myth but as memory, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. Cultures from Egypt to the Andes preserve tales of luminous teachers, of gods who arrived from a land of ice, teaching astronomy and geometry, then vanishing when the world drowned. The pre-Incan legends of Viracocha, the Sumerian accounts of Enki, even the Hopi stories of the ant people, all speak of a race that survived a great flood by retreating beneath the world. Could these be echoes of refugees from a continent destroyed by the sudden onset of ice? Geologists studying Antarctica's crust have long noted its peculiar thickness, as if vast constructions or dense foundations once underlay it. The continent's bedrock is divided into 2 masses, East and West Antarctica, connected by a rift valley filled with volcanic ridges.
Some seismic readings show cavities hundreds of meters tall within those ridges. Officially, they are lava tubes. Yet when the US Navy conducted Operation High Jump in 1947, a massive expedition involving ships, aircraft, and over 4,000 men, the mission's declassified goals included aerial mapping and testing of cold weather equipment. Unofficially, its logs describe flights encountering sudden warm air pockets, fog banks that interfered with compasses, and glimpses of dark openings in the ice cliffs. Admiral Byrd, who commanded the operation, later wrote in a private note that he had seen a land beyond the pole, lush and green, over which flew creatures unlike any known. Critics dismissed this as exhaustion or poetic metaphor, but Byrd's words, written before his death, include coordinates that point directly toward the sector where those gravitational anomalies still persist. Scientists today insist Antarctica has been buried beneath ice for at least 14 million years, but ice cores are dated by trapped atmospheric gases, not by the materials below. If a rapid crustal shift displaced an earlier temperate region southward, a theory proposed by Charles Hapgood in the 1950s and once endorsed by Einstein himself, then the civilization that mapped its coastlines could indeed have existed within human memory, later frozen in place when the continents slid into polar latitudes. Einstein's marginal note to Hapgood reads, "I find your idea fascinating, and it could explain much that otherwise appears impossible." To many, it remains just that. Impossible. Yet explorers who have stood on the ice know that Antarctica defies ordinary time. In the silence between katabatic winds, there are moments when the air itself seems to hum, as if resonating with something buried deep below. Late in the austral summer of 2016, a Chilean research outpost detected low-frequency vibrations that repeated every 19 hours. Seismographs traced them to a point beneath the Wilkesland anomaly, a region already known for its magnetic irregularities. The waves pulsed like a mechanical rhythm, not a natural tremor. When the recordings were analysed, the pattern matched the mathematical ratio of 3 to 2 to 1, a harmonic sequence often used in ancient architecture. The following year, satellite imagery of that same zone showed a circular depression nearly 400 kilometers wide, partially obscured by snowdrifts. To the untrained eye, it looked like an impact crater, but its edges were smooth, its center unusually flat, as if not from a collision, but from subsidence. Beneath it, gravity readings suggested a dense metallic structure 3 kilometers down. No natural process could explain its symmetry. When this data reached a handful of independent analysts, one of them, a geophysicist named Dr. Lena Voronin, compared the dimensions to known ancient sites. The ratio of its diameter to depth matched precisely that of the Great Pyramid of Giza, magnified 1,000-fold. She proposed that both were built upon the same geometric principles, a planetary grid once mapped by a civilization that understood Earth's energy lines. Her paper was quietly withdrawn from publication. Within months, she accepted a private research position in the Southern Hemisphere. She has not been heard from publicly since, and so the story returns to silence. The same silence that has always cloaked Antarctica. The silence of white horizons and buried time. But beneath the weight of ice and secrecy, the pattern remains. Maps that should not exist. Magnetic fields that hum with artificial order. Legends that converge on a single idea that our history began, not in the Fertile Crescent, but on a continent now locked in eternal winter. The ice does not forget. and in its depths the past waits, preserved in crystalline stillness. The ice does not forget. It holds every flake of fallen snow, every breath of vanished air. Layer by layer, year by year, it keeps its memories in silence. Beneath that silence, something older than memory still sleeps. In the Austral winter of 2017, a multinational team quietly assembled under the guise of climate research. Their true purpose was buried within encrypted funding documents. Subglacial Structure Survey, Wilkes Land Sector. The team's base sat on a plateau of compressed snow, its prefab walls groaning in the wind. There were 12 of them, geophysicists, engineers, linguists, and one historian whose name appears nowhere in the official record. They were told they would be drilling to sample ice composition. They were not told what the coordinates truly signified. The borehole descended through 3 kilometers of ice, a smooth column of darkness lined with sensors. For days, the readings were normal. Pressure, temperature, mineral content. Then, one evening, the seismograph spiked. A pulse rippled upward from below, steady, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of stone. Instruments registered an energy surge, brief, faint, but organized. The historian, a quiet man named Avery Holt, noted in his field journal, "The pattern repeats in harmonic thirds. This is not seismic noise. It is intention." When the drill reached bedrock, the bit struck something smooth, metallic, hollow. For a long moment, no one spoke. The geologist on duty wiped frost from the monitor, staring at the reflection of an impossible surface. Polished, curved, neither rock nor ice. They withdrew the bit, lowered a fiber optic camera, and saw darkness giving way to geometry. Parallel grooves intersecting at perfect angles. A doorway. Orders came from the sponsoring agency to halt operations and await instructions. Instead, the team sealed the radio room and continued. Their final transmission, later leaked, contained 4 words before static consumed it. "We are inside now." No official recovery team ever reached that site. Weeks later, a satellite flyover recorded that the entire outpost had collapsed into a sinkhole more than 100 meters wide. The coordinates were declared unsafe for further drilling. Yet in 2019, a Swedish research drone skimming low across the region captured faint magnetic interference at the same location, an oscillating field still active beneath the snow. What the lost expedition found has never been verified, but fragments of their data cache, recovered from a secondary server in Christchurch, revealed a series of images. Corridors carved from black basalt, their walls inlaid with metallic filigree that glowed faintly blue. One frame showed symbols etched into stone, spirals, triangles, and a form resembling an eye enclosed within concentric circles. Holt's notes attached to the file read simply, "Same sequence as Göbekli Tepe, mirrored." If true, it meant that the oldest known temple on Earth shared an inscription pattern with something buried beneath Antarctica. Göbekli Tepe dates to at least 9,600 BCE, the very era when ice began to seize the southern world. Across the next few years, whispers spread through academic circles. A handful of climatologists who had analysed deep core anomalies were reassigned or retired abruptly. One, Dr. Amira Chen, gave a single interview before vanishing from public life. "The isotopic data doesn't lie," she said. "Something released heat from within the continent about 12,000 years ago, fast enough to melt localized sections from below. Not volcanic, not tectonic. Controlled, as if the land defended itself. and asked what she meant, she only replied, "There are mechanisms under that ice older than us." The notion of mechanisms would have seemed absurd a century earlier, but radar mapping in the 2020s uncovered regular rectangular voids stretching in linear paths hundreds of kilometers long beneath the Ross ice shelf. Officially, these were interpreted as subglacial channels. Unofficially, a few analysts compared their spacing to the street grids of ancient cities. One even overlaid the pattern upon a transparent projection of Plato's description of Atlantis. The ratios matched within 5%. The legend of Atlantis had always pointed west, toward the Atlantic, yet Plato's original Greek text never specifies an ocean, only beyond the Pillars of Heracles, southward where ice and fire meet scholars. Later assumed this meant the Strait of Gibraltar, but some linguists now argue that beyond the pillars could refer to the southern pillars of the world, the limits of navigation, the edge of the known sea. Perhaps he meant the Antarctic. In 2024, during an unprecedented heatwave, a section of the Thwaites Glacier calved, exposing dark stone beneath. Satellite photographs showed angular formations protruding through the ice, rectilinear, tiered, distinctly architectural. Within days, the imagery was scrubbed from public databases, replaced by lower resolution composites. But not before several researchers downloaded the originals. One geologist described the formations as step pyramid fragments the size of city blocks. Another noted an unmistakable feature, a colossal archway oriented toward true north. True north, not magnetic. Whoever built it had understood planetary geometry long before compasses existed. The story might have ended there, folded into myth again, if not for what followed. As the glacier retreated further, a subglacial cave opened near the Weddell Sea. Inside, expedition drones recorded air temperatures far above freezing and a faint luminescent haze. When the footage was analysed, it revealed crystalline pillars rising from an obsidian floor, each carved with glyphs that pulsed faintly, almost like breathing. Spectral analysis suggested the light came from bioluminescent microorganisms, but the pattern of their glow repeated mathematical sequences found in human DNA. No one could explain how life had survived there, sealed off for millennia, yet perfectly adapted to emit coded light. Some speculated that these organisms were descendants of surface species trapped during the sudden glaciation, evolving in isolation. Others whispered that they were engineered, biological recorders left behind by the civilization that vanished.
The oldest myths on record, Sumerian, Mayan, Egyptian, all speak of beings who preserved knowledge through light and sound. Perhaps in this cave beneath Antarctica, that metaphor had always been literal. Holt's recovered journal pages end abruptly, but his final entry reads, "Language is vibration. If they stored it in living cells, it would last forever." After 2025, multiple governments restricted civilian flights over several Antarctic sectors. The official explanation cited environmental protection. Yet private satellite operators noticed new installations, rectangular facilities buried under white domes, their layouts aligned precisely along ley line coordinates identified by Hapgood decades earlier. Energy signatures from those sites corresponded to microwave transmissions, bouncing between stations in rhythmic bursts. Whatever was being studied, it was communicating with itself. As years passed, climate change exposed more of the continent's hidden past. Petrified forests emerged from melting ice cliffs.
Beneath them, scattered obsidian fragments shaped like tools. Carbon dating was impossible. The material was too old, its isotopes long decayed. But under electron microscopy, each shard revealed microscopic engravings, fine, spiraled grooves resembling a kind of data storage far beyond primitive carving. Scientists from the University of Melbourne compare them to optical discs, capable of encoding vast information in three-dimensional lattices. "We might be holding their library," one researcher whispered, "and we can't even read the cover." The deeper the ice retreated, the clearer the pattern became. Symmetrical terraces, parallel ridges, and in one case, a perfectly circular depression 2 kilometers across, its rim dotted with monoliths. The arrangement matched the lunar cycle when viewed from the sky. Whoever designed it had built the calendar you could see from orbit. In time, the debate shifted from if to who. Some believed these were the last survivors of an antediluvian culture that spanned the globe, a civilization destroyed by its own mastery over nature. Others proposed that what lay beneath the ice was not human at all, but something that preceded humanity, guiding its evolution through encoded myth. Yet the quiet consensus among those few who had seen the data firsthand was simpler, and perhaps more haunting, that our ancestors once knew this place, called it home, and lost it to a catastrophe they could neither prevent nor fully forget. When people settled again in warmer lands, they carried fragments of that memory, stories of floods and shining teachers, of stars that guided builders to recreate what had been lost. Egypt's pyramids, Tiwanaku's temples, the Nazca lines, even Stonehenge, each a faint echo of the geometry first perfected in the far south. The blueprint of civilization itself may have been Antarctic in origin. By 2035, an independent research collective named Project Eternum announced a startling discovery. Beneath the Ameri ice shelf, sonar readings revealed a vast dome structure composed of interlocking hexagonal plates. Each plate resonated when struck by seismic pulses, producing harmonic tones that modulated across frequencies similar to human speech. When the team transmitted simple sine waves back into the ice, the structure responded, altering its frequency as if in dialogue. Within hours, the collective's online data feed went dark. Official channels denied the experiment had ever occurred, but a backup of the transmission, circulated quietly among academics, captured the final exchange. The returning signal formed a pattern that, when converted into visual spectrum, revealed a single image, a spiral galaxy centered upon a triangle pointing upward, mirrored by another pointing down, the symbol of above and below. As above, so below, the oldest sign of balance. It was as if the ice itself had spoken, reminding us that what was lost still endures in reflection. Today, Antarctica remains closed to nearly all unsanctioned exploration. Researchers work under strict observation, their findings filtered before publication. Yet satellite anomalies continue to appear. Heat blooms where no volcanoes exist. Magnetic lines that pulse in sync with lunar cycles. Every decade, new theories emerge and fade, but the whispers persist. The map was right. The myths were memories. The ice is only a veil. If one could stand at the South Pole on a windless night and listen closely, perhaps they would hear it, the faint hum rising through the frozen earth, like the low note of an immense instrument tuned to the heartbeat of the planet. Some say it is the cry of shifting glaciers. Others, the breath of a civilization dreaming beneath its own tomb. Imagine descending through the miles of ice, through centuries of snowfall compacted into translucent glass. The air grows warm, tinged with mineral sweetness. Below, light glimmers, soft, blue, alive. You step into a cavern vast as a city, its walls carved with spirals that seem to move when you breathe. A river of liquid water winds through arches of obsidian, reflecting constellations no longer visible in the night sky. In the center stands a pillar engraved with patterns that match the human genome. At its base, the words, or their ancestor, spiral inward. We became the memory, so the world would begin again. Perhaps that is the hidden truth of Antarctica. Not merely a lost civilization, but a seed vault of consciousness, preserved in ice until humanity was ready to remember. Every myth, every fragment, every inexplicable leap in knowledge may be echoes awakening as the planet warms and the veil thins. And maybe, one day soon, when the last sheet of ice slips into the sea, the halls beneath will breathe again. Machines will hum, lights will rise, and the forgotten architects of the world will look upon their descendants and know that the long winter has finally ended. Until then, the continent sleeps, its mountains whispering beneath auroras, its lakes sealed in glass, its truths frozen between time and silence. The wind that circles it carries an ancient rhythm, the same measured pulse, felt by every explorer who has ever stood upon its threshold. The ice does not forget, it waits, and somewhere deep within that waiting, humanity is listening back. The forts of forgotten time. The world is hushed tonight, and you drift through the folds of history as if through mist. The air is cool, and distant mountains fade into shadow. Before you lies a land that remembers, the stones of ancient walls, the towers of forgotten keeps. They stand silent, still guarding secrets time could not erase. You walk softly, as if not to wake the ghosts who linger there. High in the Himalayas, the first of these fortresses awaits. Rupkund, where the air is thin and the snow glows faintly under the moon. Near its ruins lies a frozen lake filled with hundreds of bones, perfectly preserved in ice. They say a storm once swept across the mountain, and those who journeyed toward the fort were struck down by hail the size of fists. Were they pilgrims? Were they soldiers sent to guard some hidden pass? The skeletons stare upward through the ice, as though still watching for the sky to clear. Wind whispers between the stones, carrying a sound almost like prayer or a warning. Far to the west, where the desert meets the Dead Sea, another fortress rises from rock and dust, Masada. Its steep cliffs glow red beneath the setting sun. Here, Jewish rebels once stood against the might of Rome. When the Romans finally breached the walls, the story goes that all inside had chosen death over capture. Yet, beneath the sands, archaeologists have found signs of something quieter, the meals they shared, the messages they carved into stone, as though life continued long after the legend says it ended. The fortress remains still, heavy with silence, as if the truth itself cannot decide which tale to tell. The sound of waves pulls you onward, warm, tropical, and uneasy. The walls of Fort Charles in Jamaica tilt slightly toward the sea. Once proud and strong, half the fort vanished when the earth shook in 1692 and the ocean swallowed the city of Port Royal. Divers still explore its ghostly remains, where doors hang open beneath the waves and muskets lie rusted in the sand. Some claim they have seen the silhouettes of soldiers standing guard in watery corridors, repeating their duty forever beneath the tide. From the Caribbean's warmth to the hidden jungles of India, there is a fortress that does not show itself. Mahendragiri, the lost stronghold of the ancient epics. It is said celestial beings built it in a single night, its towers glowing with divine light. Yet no explorer, no satellite, has found more than fragments of old walls buried beneath vines. Perhaps it sank into the earth, or slipped into the stories of gods who once walked among men. The air there hums softly, as though the ground itself remembers where it used to stand. The mist clears, and you find yourself standing before the gates of Mycenae in Greece, its entrance crowned by two great lions carved from stone. They have guarded this place for 3,000 years, and their gaze has not softened. The blocks that form these walls are so vast that ancient peoples had giants build them, cyclopes who shaped the stones when the world was still young. The corridors still smell faintly of dust and olive oil, and if you listen closely, you can hear the echo of bronze striking bronze, the sound of a civilization that believed its kings could speak with the gods. Across the plains of Rajasthan, India glows gold beneath a burning sky. Chittorgarh Fort rises from the earth like a sandstone crown. Its towers and temples shimmer in the heat. Here, the story of Queen Padmini unfolds. Her beauty is said to have sparked war. When the siege came and defeat was certain, the women of the fort chose fire over capture. They walked into the flames as the men rode out to meet death. Even now, villagers speak of nights when the air grows warm, and faint music rises from the fort, as if the souls who burned still dance in the light they created. Beyond the cliffs of Northumberland stands Dunstanburgh Castle, its ruins etched against a cold grey sea. The wind moans through the empty halls, carrying the tale of a black-armoured knight who walks the battlements at dusk. He was once a lord betrayed by his kin, struck down before his time. Now fishermen claim to see him standing at the edge of the cliffs, his armour glinting faintly, watching for ships that never come. The sea below churns endlessly, yet he remains, a guardian of sorrow, waiting for peace that never arrives. In the heart of Manila, shadows linger inside Fort Santiago. Its stone corridors lead to dungeons that once held prisoners of war. When the gates were sealed during the Second World War, those within vanished without trace. Soldiers who occupied the fort later spoke of whispers echoing through the tunnels, the clinking of unseen chains, the soft murmur of prayers spoken by voices long gone. Some say the air itself remembers suffering, and when night falls, the fort exhales it. You rise above the canopy of Sri Lanka, where the great Sigiriya, the sky fortress, perches atop a solitary rock. Water gardens glisten below like mirrors, and ancient frescoes of celestial maidens smile from the walls. Its king once built this citadel to live among the clouds, but after his death the place was abandoned, left to vines, rain, and myth. Who truly designed its genius? A mortal king or minds from another age? The polished walls still reflect sunlight, as if the builders wished to capture heaven itself within stone. In the mountains of Iran lies the broken remains of Alamut, the assassin's fortress. It was said that from here a hidden order ruled with shadows and secrets, men who could strike fear into kings. Beneath its walls once lay vast libraries of knowledge, scrolls of science, philosophy, and mystery. When the Mongols came, fire consumed it all, and the tunnels sealed themselves beneath rubble. Yet somewhere below, many believe the last keeper hid what was most precious, wisdom meant for a world not yet ready to understand it. Across the sea, off the cliffs of Western Ireland, the ancient fort of Dunangus teeters at the edge of the Atlantic. Its semicircular walls end abruptly in air, the cliff dropping away into endless sea. No rear defences, no safety, only the roaring wind. Some say the builders sought not protection, but communion with the ocean itself, raising stone walls where earth and water meet eternity. The stones here hum with salt and age, and seabirds wheel above like guardians of a forgotten right. Further north, traces of the lost forts of Hadrian's Wall sleep beneath English soil. The Romans built dozens along that long frontier, but a few are missing, erased without fire, without record. Excavations reveal the outlines of roads that lead nowhere and gates that open into earth. It is as though the forts themselves stepped quietly out of history, leaving behind only the faint impression of their absence. Sometimes, after a rain, the patterns reappear in the grass, ghosts of empire drawn in green and shadow. In Syria, the Crac de Chevalier rises like a dream of geometry. Crusader knights once called it the perfect fortress, walls within walls, towers arranged with mathematical grace. Even today, engineers marvel at its design, how air and water still flow through hidden channels as if the stones breathe. Beneath its chapel, tunnels spiral into darkness, and though war has scarred its surface, the heart of the fortress endures, serene, balanced, timeless. Then comes Pangar Fort, deep in the forests of Rajasthan, often called the most haunted fort in the world. Local legend tells of a sorcerer who cursed it, binding all who dwell within. After sunset, the gates are locked, for those who enter at night are said never to return. Yet in daylight, it feels almost kind. Green courtyards filled with birdsong, broken archways framing the sky. Still an unease lingers, as if the stones themselves hold their breath when the sun begins to fall. In the highlands of Peru, the stones of Sacsayhuaman shimmer with precision. Enormous blocks, carved to impossible exactness, interlock without mortar. Each weighs as much as a locomotive, yet they fit so closely that not even a blade of grass can slide between them. How the builders achieved this remains a riddle. One whispered in the thin mountain air. Locals say the stones were once soft, molded like clay by the touch of gods, then hardened by the sun. The walls form a pattern, part fortress, part symbol, as if defending both the city and the secret of its creation. On a lonely mountain in France, Montségur still clings to the sky. In 1244 it fell to Crusaders, and hundreds of Catholic believers perished in the flames below. But before that final day, 4 of them escaped through secret tunnels, carrying a hidden treasure. Some say it was gold, others a relic beyond price. Perhaps even the Holy Grail itself. When the sun sets over Montségur, its shadow falls like a cross over the valley, and the wind carries whispers of what might still lie beneath the rock. In Edinburgh, the castle stands proud above the city, ancient, watchful, and cold. Long ago, a piper was sent into the tunnels beneath it, his music echoing so that those above could trace his path. But halfway through the warren of stone, the sound stopped. The piper was never seen again. Some nights, faint strains of his tune rise from underfoot, mingling with the wind. The city goes on sleeping, unaware that somewhere below, a melody still wanders, unfinished. Farther east, on the plains of Anatolia, lie the ruins of Troy. For centuries it was thought a myth, a city born from poetry. Then spades struck stone, and legend became reality. Yet Troy revealed itself not as one city, but many. Built, destroyed, and rebuilt, layer upon layer. Which of them was the Troy of Achilles and Hector? Which walls heard the cries of war? The stones say nothing. They simply endure, glowing red at dusk like embers that refuse to die. By the shores of Acre, Israel, the fortress stands half buried beneath the modern city. Acre Fortress, once home to Crusader kings, hides an underworld of tunnels, vaults, and sealed chambers untouched since the 13th century. Some are said to contain treasure, others records of lost orders. Every few decades a new passage is uncovered, leading deeper still, as though the fortress itself is slowly revealing its secrets, only to those patient enough to listen to its silence. And then, as your journey nears its end, you arrive in Cairo, where the fortress of Babylon sleeps beneath layers of history. Romans built upon older ruins, and the city grew above it like time piled in stone. Deep below, sealed by earth and memory, lie foundations from the days of the pharaohs, passages no one dares to open. Some say the fort's deepest chambers hold relics that could rewrite Egypt's story. Others believe they guard something better, left undisturbed. Above, the city hums with life. Below, eternity wakes. The wind quiets, the echoes fade. Around you, the world of fortresses begins to dissolve into a dream. The stones that once stood so solid now shimmer, melting into mist. The mountains, the deserts, the cliffs by the sea, all drift away like memories waking from a long sleep. Yet their stories remain, carved into the silence of time, carried by the night itself. The world has always built walls, to defend, to protect, and to remember. But even the strongest walls become ruins, and even ruins whisper. And as you drift further into stillness, those whispers follow, soft, distant, eternal, the voices of fortresses that have not forgotten. The world grows quiet as the pages of history open to a night that never truly ends. Across continents and centuries, the stones of old fortresses and the fields of battle remain awake, holding within them the faintest breath of what once was. The first of these ancient sentinels stands upon volcanic rock in the heart of Scotland. Its origins traced to the 12th century, though legends reach far deeper, to the Iron Age fort that first claimed the crag. Beneath its towers lies a labyrinth of tunnels and vaults, once used during siege and plague. In the 17th century, prisoners from the wars with France and America were held here, carving their names into the walls to remind the world they lived. Visitors in later centuries told of music rising from below. The ghostly piper sent down in the 1700s to map the tunnels, his melody ending abruptly where no one ever found him again. Even today, faint bagpipes are said to echo beneath the castle at dusk, blending with the hum of the wind along the battlements. Edinburgh Castle. Far to the west, in the green heart of Ireland, Leap Castle watches over County Offaly. Built in the early 1500s by the O'Carroll clan, it quickly earned a reputation for blood and treachery. Family rivalries turned the chapel within its walls into a place of murder when one brother slew another during Mass. In later centuries, when restorers uncovered a secret oubliette below the chapel floor, they found hundreds of skeletons impaled upon spikes, evidence of executions conducted in silence. The castle's most persistent legend speaks of the elemental a sulfur-smelling spirit appearing as a decayed shadow at the edge of sight, thought to be born from centuries of violence within the stone. Journey eastward through the forests of Transylvania to Bran Castle, completed around 1388, under the order of Hungarian kings to guard the mountain pass between Wallachia and Brasov. Though often called Dracula's Castle, the link to Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, is mostly legend. Yet the stories endure, travelers glimpsing figures that vanish in mirrors, unseen hands brushing past candle flames, whispers in languages long dead. The fortress survived Ottoman incursions, Habsburg rule, and revolution, its towers standing like pale fangs against the Carpathian night. Across the sea in northern England lies Chillingham Castle, established in the late 1200s as a border fortress during the wars between England and Scotland. Its dungeons once echoed with the cries of prisoners during Edward I's campaigns. The bones of the dead were later found chained to the walls, and tales arose of the Blue Boy, a child seen glowing faintly through the stone. When restoration began in the 1920s, masons uncovered a small skeleton and scraps of blue cloth sealed within the wall, as though the story itself had waited centuries to be proven. To the far north of Scotland stands Dunnottar Castle, whose ruins cling to sea-beaten cliffs near Stonehaven. Originally built in the 14th century and seized by William Wallace in 1297, the fortress later guarded the Scottish crown jewels during Cromwell's invasion of 1651. The Covenanters imprisoned there were kept in windowless vaults. Many died before deliverance. Visitors today still speak of moaning on the wind and the fleeting shapes of prisoners leaning toward the light that never came. The Rhine Valley of Germany holds Burg Eltz, a castle spared the destruction of war since its 12th century founding. Within its quiet towers is said to linger Countess Agnes Eltz, who, in the 15th century, fought to defend her honor when a rival suitor pressed her for marriage. She died resisting him, sword in hand. Her suit of armor remains preserved, and at times faint metallic sounds echo through the upper hall, though no guard walks there. Southward into France stands Chateau de Brissac, first fortified in the 11th century and transformed during the Renaissance. Here lived Charlotte de Brézé, wife to the Duke of Brissac. Her affair and subsequent murder around 1462 birthed the legend of La Dame Verte, the Green Lady, who appears in tattered dress, her face divided between beauty and ruin. Guests describe her voice as a sigh rising through the stairwell, like wind passing through hollow stone. On England's southern coast, near the site of William the Conqueror's great victory, lies Battle Abbey, built in the late 11th century to commemorate the Battle of Hastings, 1066. The high altar was said to stand on the spot where King Harold II fell, and each October 14th local witnesses claim to hear the clash of unseen armies. Lanterns bob across the fields with no bearer, and phantom riders gallop before dissolving into fog. Across the North Sea rises Kronborg Castle in Denmark, completed in 1585 under King Frederick II to command the Øresund Strait. Known to the world as Elsinore from Hamlet, it holds its own guardian spirit, Holger Danske, the legendary warrior sleeping in stone beneath the foundations. Soldiers during the Second World War reported hearing heavy footsteps in the lower vaults, slow and deliberate, as if the ancient hero stirred while his homeland stood in peril. To the east, in Poland, stands Malbork Castle, raised by the Teutonic Knights in the 13th century and once the largest brick fortress in Europe. Within its red walls, prayers in Latin once echoed over clanging steel. When Sweden's armies besieged it in the 1600s, famine and death swept through its halls. Night guards in later centuries heard chanting and the shuffle of armored feet along empty corridors. Some spoke of figures in white cloaks kneeling at the chapel altar before vanishing. In the hills of North Wales, Conwy Castle remains a monument to Edward I's conquest. Completed in 1289 as part of his Ring of Iron, 8 great towers still stand, their walls blackened by centuries of sea air. Chroniclers wrote that monks once walked the ramparts praying for peace after siege and starvation. Local fishermen have claimed to see spectral monks crossing the bridge at night, their forms lit faintly by moonlight reflected from the water. Southwest in Ireland's County Tipperary rises the Rock of Cashel, seat of kings since the 5th century, and later an ecclesiastical citadel crowned by Cormac's Chapel, 1134 CE. It became a place of tragedy in 1647 when Confederate troops massacred hundreds within the cathedral. Centuries later, travelers heard voices chanting from the ruined choir at midnight, the notes thin but harmonious, as though the monks still completed their interrupted service. In Italy's Emilia-Romagna region, the Castello di Montebello dates to the 14th century. Its haunting concerns a child named Azzurina, daughter of nobleman Ugolino Maluccio. Born 1370, she was albino, her hair appearing pale blue. On June 21st, 1375, she vanished while chasing a ball into the cellar during a thunderstorm. Every 5 years at midsummer, witnesses inside the castle hear the soft roll of a ball and a child's faint laughter, recorded by researchers yet never explained. Across the Alps in Austria, Muscham Castle, built circa 1208, gained dark renown during the 17th century Salzburg witch trials, when suspected sorcerers and werewolves were imprisoned and executed. In later centuries, keepers reported chains dragging across floors and bestial figures glimpsed in torchlight. The castle's archives still preserve confessions signed in trembling hands, reminders of fear turned to persecution. Now the story drifts from fortresses of stone to the open ground of war. In Belgium, the field of Waterloo, fought 18 June 1815, ended the ambitions of Napoleon Bonaparte. More than 40,000 fell upon those ridges and orchards. Locals later told of phantom drums at twilight, and soldiers in blue marching through wheat fields that ripple though no wind moves them. Veterans returning decades later swore they heard the Emperor's final orders carried upon the breeze. Across England's Midlands lies Bosworth Field, 1485, the last battle of the Wars of the Roses. Richard III's final charge ended beneath the weight of Tudor blades. Farmers ploughing in later centuries spoke of finding bones turned black by age, and on misty mornings a solitary rider has been seen crossing the plain before fading into rain. His cry for a horse echoes faintly against the hedgerows. Northward again on the barren heath of Culloden Moor, 1746. The Jacobite rising met its end under Prince Charles Edward Stuart. Nearly 2,000 Highlanders died within an hour. The moor remains uncultivated, heather growing over unmarked graves. Visitors describe hearing bagpipes at dawn and seeing men in tartan walking among the stones, heads bowed, vanishing as sunlight breaks. Across the Atlantic Ocean in Pennsylvania lies Gettysburg, 1863, the pivotal battle of the American Civil War. 3 days of carnage left 50,000 casualties. The fields still hold artillery pieces like monuments of rust. Witnesses report the smell of powder and the sound of commands shouted by no one visible. In the nearby orphanage used as a field hospital, footsteps continue to move across empty rooms. South in Maryland, Antietam, 1862, marked the bloodiest single day in that same war. The cornfield where dawn fighting began has since yielded bullets, and buttons turned green with time. Locals claim that at sunrise a thin haze forms, shaped like marching lines of men. Faint musket volleys crackle and then dissolve into silence. Farther across the world, Himeji Castle in Japan, completed 1609 CE during the Tokugawa shogunate, rises white as a heron above the city. The tale of Okiku, the servant wrongfully accused of losing one of her master's 10 valuable plates, has endured since the 17th century. Cast into the well, she counts the plates nightly. 1, 2, 3, and when she reaches 9, a wail rises through the courtyard. Modern visitors claim to hear the counting in the faint trickle of water. In Rajasthan, India, lie the ruins of Pangar Fort, built 1573 CE by Raja Madh Singh. Legend tells that a sorcerer who loved the princess cursed the entire city when she spurned him, decreeing that all who dwelt there would perish. The site was abandoned by the 18th century, its gates officially closed from sunset to sunrise by government order. Travelers who have ignored the warnings describe disembodied laughter and footsteps trailing them through the dark courtyards. Across the Mediterranean to North Africa, the desert around El Alamein in Egypt bears the memory of the 1942 battles between Axis and the Allied forces. The sands conceal wreckage of tanks and men alike. At night, soldiers stationed nearby have seen columns of ghostly vehicles moving across the dunes, headlights flickering before fading into the starlight. Voices in English, Italian, and German blend in the wind, calling orders to the same indifferent night. In the Caribbean stands Castillo San Felipe del Morro in San Juan, Puerto Rico, first raised in 1539 CE by Spanish governors to guard the bay from pirates and English fleets. The fortress endured centuries of siege. Legends tell of a decapitated sentry who walks the walls, seeking his lost captain. Cannon fire has been heard at dusk, though the guns lie long silent. And on the banks of the River Thames, the Tower of London, begun 1078 CE under William the Conqueror, holds more death than any fortress of its age. Here died Anne Boleyn, 1536, Lady Jane Grey, 1554, and countless prisoners of Crown and Creed. Yeoman warders speak of cold gusts sweeping through Traitor's Gate and a headless woman walking toward the chapel. The ravens that guard the tower remain, their presence said to ensure the kingdom's survival. The night lingers as these stones remember their stories, half in history, half in the long dream of those who listen. From the shadow of the tower, the journey continues, for the world's haunted memory stretches far beyond the reach of empire. Southward across the Channel, the tranquil fields of northern France conceal the echoes of more recent sorrow. Near the village of Verdun lies the ground of the Battle of Verdun, 1916, where 10 months of relentless bombardment claimed over 700,000 lives. The forts of Douaumont and Vaux, built in the late 19th century as part of France's defensive network, remain hollowed by shell fire. At night, sentinels stationed nearby in later decades spoke of hearing marching boots within the empty corridors, and of whispered commands in German and French, overlapping in the stillness. The ossuary holds the bones of the unknown, yet the air above it feels somehow aware, as though the earth itself breathes the memory of war. In the fields of Belgium, another spectral silence lies over Passchendaele, part of the Third Battle of Ypres, 1917. The rain that drowned the trenches left an entire generation buried in mud. Farmers turning the soil still uncover helmets and bayonets rusted into the shape of roots. Locals say that in fog, the forms of soldiers rise briefly among the craters, trudging forward, their outlines dissolving when the wind changes. These are not haunting apparitions of malice, but echoes of exhaustion, lingering impressions of men who never truly found their way home. Eastward through the continent, the plains of Poland bear scars far older. Near the medieval stronghold of Grunwald, site of the decisive battle in 1410 between the Teutonic Knights and the Allied forces of Poland and Lithuania, villages once reported spectral riders crossing the fields on summer nights, their banners dimly visible in moonlight. Chroniclers of the 16th century already wrote of strange lights hovering above the ground where Grand Master Ulrich von Jungingen fell. The nearby chapel, erected in his memory, stands empty now, its walls damp, its stones cold even under the midday sun. Travelling south, the river valleys of Austria remember the Battle of Wagram, 1809, where Napoleon's armies fought the Habsburgs across the Danube. The clash was immense, its thunder carried for miles. In the early 20th century, local farmers claimed that thunder would roll from a clear sky on the anniversary of the battle. They called it the drums of Wagram, and no science could quite dispel their belief that the sound belonged to the past, returning to announce itself. Crossing to the British Isles again, the northern coast of Ireland holds Dunluce Castle, a medieval stronghold of the MacDonald clan, perched upon cliffs above the Atlantic. Built around the 1500s, it fell partly into the sea in 1639, when the kitchen collapsed during a storm, carrying servants with it. Their cries were said to echo in the waves for centuries. Visitors speak of the scent of sea salt and hearth smoke in rooms long roofless, and of harp music drifting faintly from the hall where the chieftains once feasted. South in England, another ruin keeps vigil over the moors. Berry Pomeroy Castle in Devon, begun in the late 15th century by the Pomeroy family, and later expanded by the Seymours. The legend of the White Lady, believed to be Margaret Pomeroy, imprisoned by her jealous sister, endures through centuries of retelling. Travellers in the 19th century described a pale woman gliding from the tower toward the chapel, her figure fading where ivy meets stone. Within the same walls, darker tales speak of a blue lady, a restless soul calling visitors toward hidden drops where they might join her in eternal descent. Across the channel once more stands Mont Saint-Michel, founded as a monastery in 966 CE, but fortified during the 100 Years' War. During the French Revolution, it became a prison whose cells held men driven to madness by isolation. Guards later confessed to hearing chanting from closed cells and footsteps pacing within empty corridors. The Mount's tides surge with unearthly speed, and sailors claim to see ghostly monks walking upon the water during storms. In the heart of Romania, near the banks of the Argeș River, rises Poenari Castle, the true citadel of Vlad III of Wallachia, constructed in the mid-15th century. Its steep climb of 1,480 steps has long been a pilgrimage for those seeking the origins of the Dracula legend. After Vlad's death in 1476, the castle fell to ruin, and shepherds spoke of crimson light glowing through its windows on moonless nights.
Earthquakes have shattered it again and again, yet the local people still refer to it as the fortress that bleeds. Across the Pyrenees into Spain stands Belchite, a town destroyed during the Spanish Civil War in 1937 and preserved in ruin as a memorial. The bullet-scarred church towers and fractured streets remain untouched since the fighting. Reporters visiting after midnight recorded strange radio interference, voices in static repeating the word agua. Survivors said that during the siege, the living begged for water as the wells ran dry. The ruins remain closed after dark, though some claim to see the flash of lanterns deep within the rubble. From Spain, the trail of haunted memory crosses the Alps to Switzerland, where on the shores of Lake Geneva stands Chateau de Chillon, first fortified in the 12th century. Once a stronghold of the Counts of Savoy, it became a prison during the Reformation. François Bonivard, imprisoned there from 1530 to 1536, left deep grooves in the floor where his chains wore the stone. After his release, visitors spoke of hearing the steady clink of iron and the murmur of a voice reciting psalms in the dark. The castle's underground chambers, damp and lit by narrow shafts of light, preserve the sense of faith clinging to despair. The journey turns once more toward war. In Greece, on the plains of Marathon, 490 BCE, where Athenians repelled the Persians, the Tumulus of the Dead stands as one of history's oldest memorials. Even ancient writers told of ghostly warriors seen running across the plain under moonlight, their armor gleaming faintly before vanishing. Modern travelers who camp nearby have reported distant shouting and the rhythmic sound of marching. Archaeologists explain it as wind and surf, but the legend endures that the spirits of Marathon continue to defend the freedom they won. To the north lies Thermopylae, 480 BCE, the narrow pass where King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans fell against Xerxes' army. Though the land has shifted over millennia, local shepherds still speak of shapes appearing in the morning mist. Lines of warriors standing silent beside the memorial stone inscribed with the ancient epitaph, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie." The silence of the place feels deliberate, as though the ground itself guards the memory of that obedience. Crossing to the east, the fields near Karbala in Iraq witnessed the martyrdom of Hussein ibn Ali in 680 CE, an event that shaped centuries of faith and mourning. Pilgrims visiting the shrines speak of lights that appear at dusk above the desert horizon, moving slowly before fading into the sands. Historians describe them as the lanterns of travelers, yet for believers they are signs of the eternal vigil kept by those who fell beside Hussein. Moving northward, Stalingrad, now Volgograd, bears perhaps the heaviest burden of modern ghosts. The battle fought there from 1942 to 1943 became the turning point of the Second World War, with over 2 million casualties. Even decades after Reconstruction, residents reported hearing faint singing at night, soldiers' songs rising from beneath the rubble. During excavations for new buildings, workers often uncovered bones and helmets intertwined. The city lives again, but beneath its foundations the silence remains immeasurable. Far to the east of Europe, on the plains of Mongolia, lies the field of Kalka River, 1223, where Mongol forces annihilated the armies of Kievan Rus. Chronicles tell that captured princes were crushed beneath banquet boards, while the victors feasted above. Centuries later, Russian explorers noted that the valley grew strangely quiet after sunset.
and their horses refused to approach the mound said to hold the fallen nobles. The grass there, they wrote, never grew tall. Back across oceans, the story returns to the castles of the New World. In Canada, Fort Henry at Kingston, Ontario, completed in 1837 to guard against American invasion, served through 2 world wars. During training in the 1930s, soldiers spoke of hearing a parade drum at night, though no drummer was present. A sentry once reported a full platoon marching across the parade square under moonlight, uniforms from a century earlier, vanishing as they reached the far gate. To the south in Mexico rises Castillo de Chapultepec, dating to the late 18th century. In 1847, during the Mexican-American War, 6 young cadets known as Los Niños Héroes died defending it. Their sacrifice became national legend. Guards in the 20th century claimed to hear the shouts of young voices in Spanish echoing through the courtyard, and the faint sound of muskets firing toward an unseen enemy. The flag still flies above their monument. Its fabric moving through the air is still. The Atlantic carries the memory onward to Africa, to Ghana's Cape Coast Castle, built by Swedish traders in 1653 and later used by the British in the Atlantic slave trade. Its dungeons once held hundreds of captives in darkness before ships carried them across the sea. Modern visitors often describe feeling an overwhelming heaviness upon entering, and some claim to hear weeping or the sound of chains. Historians note that the humidity condenses and drips like falling tears. Still, the impression endures that the walls remember the sorrow of those confined there. In South Africa, Spienkop, site of the 1900 battle during the Second Boer War, rises above the Tugela River. The summit's shallow graves remain where hundreds of British and Boer soldiers fell. During fog, travellers have mistaken rows of white stones for men lying in wait. When dawn burns away the mist, only the stones remain. Veterans visiting decades later spoke of hearing whispered prayers and accents from across the empire. Across the Pacific, the island of Okinawa holds Shuri Castle, once the royal palace of the Ryukyu Kingdom. Though first built in the 14th century, it was nearly destroyed during the Battle of Okinawa in 1945. Residents rebuilding after the war claimed that each new foundation uncovered human remains. At night, they heard chanting from beneath the earth, and priests performed ceremonies to appease the restless dead. The reconstructed castle now stands as both heritage and memorial. In Australia, Port Arthur in Tasmania, founded as a penal colony in 1830, still bears the marks of its suffering. The solitary cells of the separate prison reduced men to silence and madness. Guides leading night tours often report footsteps following them along the path to the chapel, and lights flickering in windows long sealed. The records describe over 1,000 deaths. Their names remain inscribed in the cemetery island offshore. Returning once more to Europe, the last whisper of this long chronicle lingers in Tewkesbury, where in 1471 the Yorkist victory secured the English crown for Edward IV. The abbey beside the battlefield still stands, its stone worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims. Locals say that on certain April nights, the sound of clashing steel drifts through the cloisters, and figures in armor walk briefly among the graves before dissolving into mist. Scholars attribute it to wind moving through the arches, yet those who have heard it know the difference between mere air and memory, so the journey ends where it began, among stones and silence. Across continents, these castles and battlefields remain not as horrors, but as records enduring testimonies of what human hands have built and destroyed. Their hauntings are less of vengeance than of remembrance, the past refusing erasure. Each fortress keeps watch over the centuries it has survived. Each field holds beneath its soil the stories of those who once stood upon it. The world sleeps, yet the walls remain. Edinburgh and Leith, Chillingham and Brissac, Bran and Elts, Hastings and Waterloo, Culloden and Gettysburg, all whisper the same truth, that time may conquer kingdoms, but memory conquers time. The faint sounds still heard, a piper's tune, a child's laughter, a soldier's drum, are not the cries of the dead, but the echo of history continuing to speak. If one listens quietly enough, the earth itself seems to murmur their names, and in that murmuring there is neither fear nor terror, only the gentle persistence of what was, folded softly into what remains. The moon drifts above the towers, the grass growed over the fields, and the centuries breathe together in the long, unbroken night of the world's remembering.